They called it a solution, a compound that removed the need for sleep. In the late 1940s, a small team of men with government clearances and quieter consciences sealed a concrete wing beneath Siberian permafrost. They promised the world a soldier who never slept. They promised the participants freedom. 5 prisoners, hand-picked from nearby prisons, signed papers at dawn and were escorted down a stairwell that the sun never touched. They were told the experiment would last 30 days. They were told to read the forms. They were told several times that they would be released if they completed the trial. A sealed chamber was prepared. Thick glass, scrubbed metal, a single bank of fluorescent lights that never flickered. Microphones lined the ceiling. Cameras recorded in grainy black and white. Scientists in the observation room watched numbers, scribbled notes, argued in suppressed voices. At 0001, on the day the gas was introduced, a technician logged, Compound N, introduced at 001. Odor, plastic and faint chemical sweet, subjects upbeat. The first 3 days passed like a strange carnival. Stories told, jokes, chanting songs to keep morale. They laughed. They were lucid. On the 4th night, one subject stopped laughing. He sat upright and stared at the corner of the room. He did not blink. The others began to keep their distance. The one who stopped speaking, subject 2, was described by the technicians as quiet, paper-thin. Nurses recalled him as polite in the intake forms. He had participated because the promise of freedom seemed kind enough. He stopped answering questions. He stopped accepting food. He remained perfectly still under the lights for hours, watching a blank wall like a man memorizing a horizon. When questioned, he would only whisper, "They're whispering." Then the microphone would pick up nothing but static. By the 5th day, the notes in the observation log shifted tone. Where there had been dry clinical summaries, there were short entries. Odd writing. Repetitions. Self-harm marks. Unclear. During an inspection, technicians found the subjects had begun to write the same line over and over, on anything they could find. Paper, their bodies, mattress covers. The phrase read, "I must stay awake." At 0317, the camera audio captured subject 2, speaking for the first time since the silence. "There is a voice in the static." He smiled then, a slow, slight curl that looked less like humor and more like recognition of something that inhabited the hum of the room. When technicians adjusted the gas levels, the lead scientist frowned. "Concentration is unchanged," he said. "Subject behavior is unrelated to dosage." The room held its breath. The writing spread like a rumor. By day 7, every subject was scribbling. Tiny slanted letters covered their hands, their thighs, the cardboard boxes the staff had used for storage. The same sentence in variations, sometimes as a frantic block, sometimes spaced and patient. "I must stay awake." The lead investigator interviewed them on camera for the record. Subject 1 recited old nursery rhymes as if testing sound against silence. Subject 3 laughed and repeated the time of execution of a cellmate, warm and casual. Subject 4 muttered coordinates. Subject 5, who'd been the most robust in intake, sat by the window and rocked, whispering to his lap. Questions about sleep were met with the same pattern. A laugh, a sharp intake of breath, fingers that struck the table. When asked why they wrote the phrase, one of them, subject 3, tilted his head and answered flatly, "If we fall, they come." He tapped the microphone and the speaker hummed, and something in the pitch felt like a reply. The science team argued about controls and variables. The lead scientist ordered more tests and reserved the right to continue. Nurses swapped worried glances. The air tasted older, as if the room inhaled dust from an old book. Night 9, the glass vibrated. A scream that could not be categorized, half animal, half human, rattled the chamber. The cameras caught a figure standing with hands clenched, hair plastered to the forehead. Blood, small, thin lines, traced fresh paths across knuckles. They had burrowed at skin to write their words deeper. When the observation team rushed in, they found the subjects rearranged. The mattress had been shredded into ribbons. The room smelled like overheated metal and old linens. On the recording, what had been a scream turned into a chant, layered and rhythmical. "Stay awake, "Stay awake." When technicians attempted to sedate them to stop the self-harm, the voices rose, not in anger but in authority. Voices speaking names, whispering instructions. The sedative had little effect. The men resisted, not like animals fighting for flight, but like men guarding a fire from being extinguished. One of the technicians, trembling, wrote in the log, "They protect something in the dark corners. They speak to it. We can't see." The lead scientist ordered the cameras to zoom, to pick at corners, to reveal shadows, but the footage remained grainy, and at the edge of the frame the shape of the room seemed to repeat like a misaligned film. The team recovered previous audio files from a discarded backup, tapes that had been labeled pre-test. When played back at low volume, the room glitched. There were cuts, yells layered over whispering. In the silence after the static, something like music, half lullaby, half metronome, could be heard. A nurse found an old cassette with handwriting that read, Unit 67. On it, a woman's voice recorded an informal report, quiet and conversational. She said, "He's been crying less. He hums at night. He stops when I hum back. We are making progress." When the team amplified the tape, they heard not only the nurse's voice, but a second, higher voice that repeated the same words offset by a fraction of a second, like an echo inside a well. At the end of the fragment came a child's laugh, unnatural in cadence. Then a soft click as if something switched off. The lead scientist noted that the recorded sample had been corrupted in a way that suggested external interference. Not a device fault, but an overlay of frequencies consistent with neurological activity. "We might be picking up brain rhythms," he said. "We might be detecting neural echo." Nobody considered that neural echo could be contagious. They tried interviews again. The camera angles were clinical. The questions were rehearsed. The subjects answered, but between each reply there was a lag, a stutter, as if language had to summon permission. Subject 1 spoke of a dream within a dream. Hallways in which doors opened only to reveal more doors. Subject 2, still gazing at the corner, said, "The corners gather." Subject 4 began to name the patients who were not there. Subject 5 hummed a tune that none of the staff could identify. Between responses, there were noises. A whisper under the respirator's hiss, the sound of pages being turned. The observation log recorded the tone of the voices, low, layered. When asked if they felt tired, 3 of them laughed, and one of them, Subject 3, gasped, then rattled off names of children. He could not explain why. The interview footage contained anomalies. During playback, small phrases repeated but out of sync. A question from the scientist would appear on the video seconds after the subject had already answered it. When the team checked timestamps, the camera logs and the audio logs disagreed. The film was not broken. It was answering to a clock that moved differently. They placed a mirror in the chamber at the request of a neuropsychologist who believed a subject seeing himself might restore identity. The metal frame was polished, the reflection clear. For hours nothing happened, but the subjects kept glancing at the glass, measuring themselves as if learning to speak again. Late into the night, the camera captured something else. A subject, Subject 1, reaching toward the mirror. His hand stopped inches away from the surface. He began to cry softly. When asked what he saw, he replied, "There are hands behind me. They do not belong to me." The mirror offered reflections that were almost right, the wrong curve of an ear, the angle of a smile slightly skewed. At first, the team thought it film artifact, then a movement, a hand that flicked across the mirrored surface but not in tandem with the subject on camera. A shadow clung to the frame like water. When the lead scientist reviewed the footage frame by frame, he noticed something else. In the reflection, behind the subjects, the room's fluorescent lights bent into a horizon. And in that horizon, something like a small head turned, too fast to register. The file froze for a half second at that frame, and every monitor in the observation room hiccuped. The writing changed. What had been a protective mantra, an attempt to ward off sleep, morphed into a series of messages, instructions, coordinates, names. The pages were pinned to walls in jagged fans. On one, in block letters, the sentence read, "Let him remain." At 04:03, the recorder picked up a phrase not uttered aloud by any subject. A thin, clear voice spoke directly into the mic. "You are not the first to listen." The source was indeterminate. Too clean to be the muffled speech of the subjects, too precise to be ambient noise. It had the cadence of someone reading from a file. When the team played the phrase slowed, there was a second line beneath the small voice, a second cadence that answered, "We were kept until the lights learned to sing." The translation box in the observation room sat unused because no language database held the second cadence. It was not a language as much as an instruction set that pressed against the part of hearing that remembered rhythm. The lead scientist demanded tests be halted. "We are not observing," he wrote in capital letters for the record. "We are participating in something." The protocol demanded removal, sedation, disconnection. The team convened and for the first time on recording heatedly argued about what to do. The containment protocols failed, not because the cell's seals fractured, but because the staff changed. A nurse recorded, with shaky hands, that she had dreamt the smile of Subject 2 at her kitchen table. The nightman woke with mattress impressions on his back he could not explain. The technician who had monitored the audio feed reported the hum followed him home. He dreamed in the same rhythm as the chamber for 2 nights. Within 72 hours, the infection, if it could be called that, left the concrete. The observation room staff began to speak in marked cadence. They repeated the phrases they had seen scrawled. The lead scientist, who had once written neat bullet points, began to draft loops of words and lyrics, underlining them. He convinced himself it was proximity, long hours, recycled air. Yet even as rationality strained, the notes multiplied. The windows of the observation room fogged with breath that didn't come from anybody present. Phones lost signal when near specific tapes. The hospital's clock displayed multiple times at once. When the administrator tried to erase logs, the pages rewrote themselves. The project shut down in paperwork the day the technicians found marks on the inside of the observation glass. Scratches, crowded and impatient like fingernails trying to form a path. The lead scientist crossed his name out and wrote "postponed." Officially, the project paused. Unofficially, men still came and went at night. The lead scientist argued, softly at first, then with fervor, that the phenomenon warranted more study. He claimed the data contained a pattern, a key to extending consciousness. To accept closure was to waste a discovery. Secret permissions were signed. The chamber reopened. The 5 bodies were still there when they entered. They had not died. They were not the same. 2 subjects had hollowed eyes and the slow, ritual movements of someone learning an equation in their sleep. One had folded his hands on his chest and, when asked a simple question, answered in another's voice as if reading. The bed where Subject 5 had lain now held something unnerving. A childlike bundle of cloth that moved in small, staccato bursts, as if testing limbs. The staff argued, some refusing to touch the files, others offering to help. The lead scientist presented a defense. "We will learn how they connect. We will observe the bridge between brain and rhythm." He proposed an adjustment to compound N. He said words like controlled exposure and translation. They kept the cameras running. As days became blurred, the team stopped using numbers. Names emerged. Nicknames murmured in the observation room. Child 67 was what one technician scribbled in a rushed log when he discovered a file referencing pediatric cases in a sealed archive. The name stuck not because it was accurate, but because it made the phenomenon manageable to say. A nurse found a file labeled with a different system. Neural Echo Protocols, Unit 67B. It contained charts of rhythms, of repeating spikes that looked like fingerprints. The charts hinted at an attempt to synchronize a human mind to a repeated external frequency. The idea made some men sick because it implied intent. Someone had tried to teach a room to sing. They began to speak of the bridge. They speculated that the children used in earlier experiments had not been subjects in the modern sense, but hosts, vessels tuned to a rhythm that refused to stop. As the team poured through decades of files, they found the same small symbols repeated, etched into patient records and scrawled in notebooks beside names crossed out. When a scientist played back a long-range recording slowed to an impossible rate, a voice emerged that sounded like both a child and an old man singing a countdown. It ended abruptly, with the sound of a small hand clapping. Then the same voice recited, "Keep it awake, keep it awake." They sealed the wing. They wrote reports with neat letterhead. They called it terminated. Papers stacked in bureaucratic order until the dead ones outnumbered the living. And yet a tape remained, an unmarked cassette found in a locker years later by a maintenance worker who never opened the wing again. On the recovered tape, the voice of the old nurse begins, a casual voice like someone dictating a diary. She speaks of days and wires and the hush of a child's breathing. For the first 20 minutes, she records nothing but small observations. He hums, and he listens. Then her voice falters. A second layer appears beneath the first. Soft, almost a lullaby. The recording includes tiny, precise clicks, like a metronome counting very slowly. At minute 23, the nurse's voice softens and addresses the child by a name she finds on a file. 67. She asks a simple question, the photographer's mic catching every intonation. A pause. Then the answer comes. Not from the child, but from the room itself. A voice that matches no throat. We remember. Then, faint and immediate, another line. We are staying. The tape ends on a single exhale and a laugh half broken, half playful. When the maintenance worker stopped the player, the room seemed colder. He closed the locker carefully, not daring to look at the faded label. In the years after, rumors circulated of maintenance crews who refused to work the night shift, of students who joked about Unit 67 and found scratches along their desks, of nurses who never forgot the cadence of a lullaby that came on no radio. The tape disappeared into a box of artifacts, but the recordings had leaked. An archive copy made its way to a researcher in another country who, for reasons he refused to explain, converted the cassette to a digital file and uploaded it to a private server. We found that server 3 decades later, and now you are listening. If you listen too long, if you hum along, if you answer when the room says your name, the tape will have done what it was intended to do. The log ends with one final note, in a handwriting that trembles. They will keep it awake. Silence. Then the static returns, low and patient, and you can feel a rhythm. Soft, like a nursery metronome, counting breaths. The thought never leaves.